Hey, what's up, y'all? Bushel Billy here. Part 2 of our tassel wrap series, and we're back out to the field where we shot some pictures in the last video. We're 5 days after those pictures were taken. Good news is the tassels did a fairly decent job of fighting their way out of this tassel leaf the last couple days. When we were here 5 days ago, it was still stuck in this last leaf. It did a pretty good job fighting its way out. Bad news is we're all but out of pollen. There's just not a whole lot left. We went crashing through, taking ear samples, and they're just not nearly the pollen fall that there was 5 days ago. So I'd safe to say pollination's done and we're out of pollen. So let's take a look at the ears and see what we wound up with. Quick demonstration on the shake test that we talked about in the last video. I'm going to take and cut the excess silks off. Those are the real long silks that we talked about last time that were just growing and growing, looking for pollen. And then I'll take and cut the ear shank off the bottom of the ear. And then I split the husk down the sides because we want to do a real gentle job of peeling these leaves off the cob to see what silks are attached and what's not. You remember from last time, once a silk has pollinated, it detaches from the kernel. So anything that we've got left attached to the ear has not been pollinated. And since we're out of pollen, this is what we're going to wind up with. So we pull those husks back, the leaves back, and there we've got the silks, and we shake them, and you can see all the pollinated silks fall to the ground, and what's left are the silks that didn't get pollinated because the tassel was wrapped up in that last leaf. Now, it's not uncommon to have unpollinated silks at the tip because those are the last to emerge. So this isn't that big a deal. Silks emerge from the bottom to the top. So these extra long ones were the first ones to emerge. Should have been pollinated first, but didn't get it done. So we pulled 14 ears here and counted a rough quick count on the remaining silks. And we come up on average 48 unpollinated silks on the main part of these ears. So just quick dashboard math, at 30,000 plants an acre, 3 kernels makes a bushel, 90,000 kernel bushel. So 48 unpollinated silks, that's about a 16 bushel loss in this field. Just estimated it. This field has got a final stand somewhere around 34,000. We did a kernel count on all 14 ears and typically wound up with a kernel count of 606 per ear. And of those 606 kernels, on average, we've got 48 that didn't pollinate. And if you zoom in close, we've got a good example, as long as that phone focuses. You can see these kernels, what we call blister stage, which means they pollinated, they have blistered, and we are on the way of making grain. This row here is still flat and tight to the cob. These is where the silks were attached, and these kernels did not pollinate. So these are all going to be blanks. These pollinated just fine. These will go on to make grain. But a good example of 4 kernels here that pollinated, 4 kernels here that pollinated, and 2 in the middle that never got pollen. So on a 90,000 kernel bushel, we had an estimate of I think 229 bushel an acre, and we're estimating 8 to 10% loss due to pollination, which means we're going to be off somewhere in that 16 to 20 bushel, assuming these are representative of the whole field. Now, it is possible for these kernels to swell and fill in the gap. And what that requires is driving our kernel count from 90,000 kernels per bushel down to 75,000 kernels per bushel, 65,000 kernels per bushel, to make up the difference. And I'll walk you through that math. Okay, so let's cut out and take a closer look at the math from our silk counts and our ear evaluations in this field. So if you recall, the way we estimate yield in corn, we take rows around times length times population divided by kernels per bushel gives us our yield estimate. So what we came up with in this field, we pulled the ears, did a possible kernel count of 608 on the average. Our harvestable ears are 34,000 an acre. Assuming a 90,000 kernel bushel gives us a yield estimate of 230 bushel. When we did our kernel count, we also did a shake test and came up with an average of 52 unpollinated kernels per ear, not including the tip, because you don't always have great pollination on the tip anyways. But in the main part of the year, we came up with 52 fewer kernels due to pollination issues. So if we rerun the math, you come up with a kernel count of 556 times your harvestable ears of 34, assuming a 90,000 kernel bushel, gives us a 210 yield estimate, or a 20 bushel loss if we had not had the pollination issues. So now this is all assuming that 90,000 kernels per bushel, and we know when we have blanks or missing pollinated kernels in the air, that the surrounding kernels can swell and fill in the gaps. So the next question is, how big do the kernels have to get to make up for that 20 bushel loss? So if we rerun the math on this, and we start with our actual pollinated kernels of 556 times our harvestable ears of 34 divided by our yield estimate, our initial yield estimate of 230, then that gives us a kernel count of 82,000. So what that means is that the pollinated kernels on that ear need to swell up to an 82,000 kernel bushel versus a 90,000 kernel bushel to get us back to that 230 bushel yield target, which, given the ideal growing conditions and the high performance of some of these hybrids, that's certainly possible. Keep in mind, a lot of your NCGA guys, that your big time winners, big yield numbers, this 90,000 gets driven down to 65,000 kernels per bushel. So we do know it's certainly possible to reach this 82,000. Keep in mind, these plants have had a rough season. They were under a great deal of stress. Whether or not they have enough fight to get down to 82,000, that's kind of up to the corn plant. But also in the back of your farmer's mind, he's thinking, well, I could be pushing 608 kernels down to 80,000, but now I'm pushing 556 kernels down to 80,000 just to get back to where I started. So, either way, they're going to realize a loss on this. Not necessarily an operating loss, but certainly an opportunity loss in bushels. But there certainly is the possibility to make up ground. So that's kind of how all the math breaks out. If you want to give that a quick screenshot, then there it is. This has got 55 days left to black layer. As hot as it's been, it may be 45 days of black layer, but it's supposed to cool off, give this corn a break. So we're going to bank on 50 to 55 days of grain fill left. And whether that corn plant's got enough fight in it that it can fill in these blanks or not is kind of in between the corn plant and Mother Nature. We don't know for sure. But from a management standpoint, we do know that we're looking at an 8 to 10% loss in potential just from the lack of pollination. So anyways, if you've had tassel emergence issues, once the tassels quit throwing pollen, go out, do a shake test, do a visual inspection, and get an idea of just how grain fill is going to look like in your field as we make that final management determination. R3 is really our last chance to make a management decision to affect yield. And if we're looking at an 8 to 10%, 12% loss right off the bat, that may change our minds whether or not we want to invest any more into this crop. So hope that helps you evaluate where you're going to wind up, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you.